The first round hissed past Falcon's cheek before any of them realized they were already being watched. The shot came from somewhere beyond the horizon, so distant the sound arrived, like an afterthought carried on the valley wind. Instinct dropped her to the gravel, her palms grinding into the cold rock as dust rose around her. Havoc froze mid-step, scanning the empty ridgeline. Scope swung his spotter scope toward the far reaches of no man's land, his breath held tight in his chest. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Before we begin this mission, hit subscribe and ring the bell, because some stories of courage never made the headlines, but they deserve to be heard. Tell us where you're watching from and who's the hero in your family. The ridge sat high above a labyrinth of dry ravines and broken shale, a place the maps marked only as Observation 6A. It was little more than a cracked spine of rock overlooking 20 kilometers of desolate valley where heat shimmered across the earth like a living thing. They had arrived only minutes earlier, their boots crunching softly as they took positions along the jagged crest. Falcon had felt unsettled from the moment they stepped onto the ridge. The wind here didn't flow it, bent, twisted. Funneled through the cliffs in unpredictable pulses that tugged at her gear and rattled her nerves. She crawled behind a half-buried boulder and steadied her breathing. "Scope," she whispered. "Did you see anything?" "Not yet," he murmured, still sweeping. Could have been a ricochet or some idiot popping off at range. Falcon knew better. Around that close wasn't luck. Someone out there had eyes on them. Havoc crouched beside her, his jaw tight. "Everyone stay low. Torchlight, check in." "I'm here," Lieutenant Solon answered calmly from a slightly lower ledge. "No air assets inbound. Drones are crowding the northern routes. Command wants us tight and concealed." Falcon eased her custom long-range rifle into position, the heavy 14.5 millimeters weapon settling onto the bipod like a living animal. She flipped open her 20x spotting scope and swept the valley. Heat distorted the view, mirage layers rising and falling like waves. At 3,000 meters, the haze shimmered, swallowing distant shapes and spitting them back out. "Falcon actual eyes on movement, bearing 085, she said, the words slipping out before she could question them. Havoc crawled to her side. Movement at that range might be the heat playing tricks. "I know the difference," she replied, tightening the focus. The blur resolved into a faint pulse thermal, rhythmic moving. "Something's out there. It's not static." Scope snorted softly. 3 kilometers. That's fantasy territory. Falcon didn't look away. "I'm telling you, it's real." The ridge seemed to hold its breath with her. The valley below stretched endlessly, painted in layers of brown and pale gold. Mirage twisted every distant object, bending light until even the rocks seemed to pulse. But the movement she saw didn't belong to the earth. It was mechanical, intentional. Havoc shifted uncomfortably. "Even if it is something no one shoots that far." Falcon inhaled. "Someone just did." The second shot confirmed it. This one landed further out, kicking dust off the ridge like a warning tap. Scope finally saw it a faint glint at extreme range, so small it might have been a trick of the eye, but it aligned perfectly with the shot's direction. "There," he said, voice sharp counter-sniper. "That's no amateur. That's Spectre range work." The name weighed on the air. Spectre, an unseen marksman rumored to engage at distances conventional doctrine dismissed as impractical. Falcon felt a spike of cold work its way down her spine. Not fear exactly, but recognition. She had studied shots like that, chasing the mathematics behind them, pushing her own limits on the range. But this was different. This was a duel being forced upon them from miles away. Havoc clenched his teeth. "Everyone, stay behind cover. Torchlight. Confirm we can pull back." "Negative," Torchlight said. "Enemy drones are sweeping our exfil routes. Command says, hold position." Falcon widened her scope, scanning the valley. Range 4,000 meters, bearing 085, slow movement. "That's a convoy." Scope frowned. 4,000, you sure? "I can see the thermal bloom. They're heading for our supply corridor." Havoc's jaw tightened. "Command didn't mention armor out here." "Then someone missed it," Falcon replied. "If they reach the ravine forks, they'll hit our logistic spine in under an hour." Scope checked again, uncertain. Mirage plays tricks at that distance. Could be nothing. Falcon didn't argue. The shapes moved with intent, steady, linear, purposeful. The heat plume flickered in a rhythm no mirage could fake. "I know what I'm seeing." A sharp crack echoed. A pebble burst beside her shoulder. Falcon ducked. Spectre was probing, mapping them shot by shot. "Stay down," Havoc hissed. "We can't beat him in a long-range duel." Falcon eased her rifle under cover. "Maybe not, but we can't ignore that convoy." A drone's shadow drifted over them. Torchlight cursed. No evac until they're gone. Pinned by a ghost sniper and an incoming convoy, Falcon steadied her breathing. "You want to shoot at 4 kilometers," Scope whispered. She kept her eye on the shimmer. "Someone has to." As another distant crack echoed across the valley, Falcon steadied her breathing and began mentally charting the wind. She felt the first seed of the impossible forming in her mind, fragile but undeniable. And as the convoy crept closer, she knew the next chapter would demand more of her than any range ever had. She didn't know yet that she would take the shot no manual had ever dared describe. Falcon steadied her breathing as the valley wind began its strange rhythmic pulse, each gust a number, each lull a warning. The ridge around her felt tighter than before, as though the rock itself sensed the weight gathering in her chest. She lay prone behind a fractured outcrop barely tall enough to hide her silhouette. Scope knelt at her right, his notebook open, dope charts flapping in the sporadic gusts. Havoc crouched behind them a few meters back, watching both the valley and the sniper, who might already be adjusting for his next shot. Torchlight kept low on the ridge's western lip, radio in hand, whispering into a channel that barely carried a whisper in return. The convoy Falcon had spotted was no mirage. Retcon feeds finally trickled through the interference, confirming a high-value transport crawling across the desert Florin, electronic warfare node at its center, pulsing out the jamming that made their comms nearly useless. It was moving slow but steady, a hulking shadow glinting in the quivering heat. If it slipped past the ravine forks, it would cripple the logistical artery feeding the friendly lines. Falcon rolled her wrists once, letting the tension shake loose before she settled behind her rifle. 4,000 meters, she murmured, half to herself. Arc height. Several hundred meters, time of flight, 7 to 8 seconds. Numbers grounded her. They didn't lie. They didn't flinch. Scope spoke softly. Wind's quarter value from the left. Shears getting funneled off the cliffs. It'll wobble the first 2 seconds of flight, then stabilize. Falcon nodded, adjusting her cheek weld. Spindrift will shove it right. Coriolis nudges left at this latitude. They'll counsel, but only if the wind cooperates. Havoc shifted uneasily. You still think this is possible? She didn't answer immediately. Her breath fogged her throat mic. The valley shimmered, bright with heat, as though the earth itself trembled. Possible, she whispered, barely, but necessary. A crack echoed faintly, the kind of sound only distance could stretch thin. Falcon jerked sideways instinctively as the rock beside her chipped open. Spectre had found her again, or at least found the sliver of ridge where she lay. Scope hissed, "We have to move." Falcon slung the rifle tight and slid across the rock face, each movement deliberate. Exposed terrain yawned between boulders. Another shot hit just behind her, spraying stone across her neck. She felt the burn of a shard cutting a thin line across her skin, but ignored it. She ducked behind a new perch slightly lower on the ridge, far from ideal, but safer for the moment. "This is Torchlight," came the strained voice from the western ledge, "requesting air support, priority 1. Drones are jamming every channel. Anyone copy?" Static swallowed the rest. Falcon didn't need to hear more to know the answer. Scope eased beside her again, hands shaking slightly as he resumed scribbling calculations. "He's walking his shots. He has your distance. Probably has our wind, too." Falcon absorbed that. The idea of a marksman at this range, hitting within meters, felt unreal yet utterly true. "He's forcing us to rush," she said. "We can't rush." Havoc crawled up beside them, face hardened into something brittle. "Convoys minutes out from our supply corridor. If we don't act now, the entire west line goes dark. I need options." Falcon stared through her scope again, letting the mirage shift until it aligned, layer by trembling layer, with the convoy below. "There's one option," she said. "A narrow shooting lane. It lines up only when the wind cycle hits its weakest point. I've been watching it 1 second, maybe less." Scope blinked. 1 second. Falcon. "That's barely enough," she cut in. Havoc exhaled slowly, torn between the safety of his sniper and the safety of the entire front line. "If you miss," he said quietly, "Spectre gets you. If you hit, we buy the line another week, maybe more." Falcon didn't look at him. "I know." He closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them with the heaviness of someone who'd made the hardest decision of the day. "Do it." Falcon placed her cheek to the stock, adjusting her grip. Her rifle felt heavier now, as though the metal understood what she was asking of it. She dialed her elevation, turret hand. The world snapped. A round struck the side of her scope housing, shattering the elevation knob into a spray of broken metal. Falcon flinched, pulling back from the rifle. She stared at the ruined turret in disbelief. Scope's mouth fell open. Havoc swore under his breath. "He saw you adjusting," Scope whispered. "He predicted the motion." That was a precision countershot. Falcon's pulse throbbed at her temples. She picked up the rifle, turned it, assessed the damage. The elevation turret hung in twisted fragments, entirely useless. She would have to hold elevation manually 30 mils, maybe more. It was a task even experienced marksmen avoided at normal engagement distances. At 4 kilometers, it bordered on absurd. Scope knelt close, voice trembling. "Falcon, that's insanity. You can't hold 30 mils steady by hand." "No," she said, swallowing the fear rising in her throat. "But I have to try." She breathed again, slower this time, letting the valley's wind pattern pulse through her bones. She studied the gusts, their rhythm, the faint pause between the rolling currents. Her mind worked at a speed her body could barely match calculations, stacking corrections, layering, an impossible shot-taking shape. Torchlight's voice returned in a thin whisper through static. "Torchlight to Falcon confirm, OO signature." "We are blind on fallback routes," the message repeated, garbled but unmistakable. Falcon inhaled, then lifted her rifle into position. She sighted along the top edge of her reticle, not through it, holding the necessary elevation with pure instinct and practiced steadiness. Scope watched her hands with awe and disbelief, as though witnessing something fragile being shaped by force of will. "Wind cycle starting," he whispered. 3-2. "Watch for the dip." Falcon tightened her jaw. The valley's breath shifted. The gust died. A stillness fell. Her finger found the trigger. She committed, and as the shot broke, she knew the valley was already waiting for what came next. 4 kilometers of silence for a moment. The entire valley seemed to breathe with her holding its lungful of wind as she committed to the impossible. Falcon lay prone on the jagged shelf of rock they had clawed their way onto, the cold pressing through her elbows and into her chest. The rifle rested against her shoulder like a weight she had waited her whole life to carry. Below, the valley stretched in washed-out browns and shimmering silver, heat rising in threads from sun-baked stone. Far beyond what most would even dare classify as a target, the convoy crawled along the lower ridge-tiny, stuttering silhouettes just over 4 kilometers away. Scope knelt beside her, wind meter cupped in his hands. Eyes narrowed at the rhythm of the air. He looked pale from the last hour's chaos, but steady enough to trust with her life. Havoc was just behind them, crouched low, scanning for Spectre's muzzle flash with a tension that made every muscle look carved from wire. Torchlight worked the radio fruitlessly, tapping the handset against his helmet each time only static answered. Falcon inhaled, slow and deep. The breath burned. The valley wind pulsed in its strange cycle, sweeping from right to left in a rolling pattern that felt more alive than atmospheric. Each gust nudged pebbles across the stone. Each lull dropped the silence like a shroud. She had the pattern memorized now. 5 seconds of drift, 1 second of stillness, then a sudden kick as the valley funneled the air back toward them. It was maddening, unpredictable to anyone but someone who had lived in the wind her entire life. "This is it," Scope murmured. "Windows coming up. 1 second, maybe less." Falco nodded, her cheek pressed against the stock. Her sight line hovered above the convoy. The improvised 30 hold felt absurd. Her elevation turret, still shattered from the round Spectre, had sent threading between them hours earlier. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from the savage concentration required to hold the mill offset perfectly without any mechanical help. Torchlight turned, face drawn. "No thin drones are killing the airwaves. We're on our own." Havoc didn't speak. His silence was permission and plea all at once. Falcon focused. Range 4,012 meters. Estimated time of flight, 7.6 seconds. Arc height, several hundred meters above her line of sight. Spin drift compensation manually adjusted. Coriolis, left shift, minimized. Wind shear, accounted for only by instinct and prayer. Scope lifted the wind meter again. Cycle starting now. 3, 2. The rock beneath them popped, dust kicking upward. A shot. Spectre had found their lane again. Falcon jerked sideways purely on instinct, the round carving a groove where her head had been. Havoc shouted, "Move! He's got the angle!" But Falcon didn't retreat. She rolled back into position, heart smashing against her ribs, the pattern of the wind already shifting again. She didn't have 2 minutes. She barely had 1. She whispered to herself, "It's this or nothing." Scope swallowed hard. "New window coming. This one's clean. I swear it's clean." The convoy rounded a shallow bend, and the U vehicle, the one jamming every hope of air supportix, posed its broadside for the first time. It was now or never. Falcon's body relaxed, the way only mastery can. Her heartbeat slowed. The valley noise dropped away until she could sense nothing but the pressure of the trigger against her fingertip. The world felt suspended. 1 second, Scope said. Wait, wait. Now Falcone exhaled and pressed the trigger. The recoil struck her shoulder like a blunt hammer. The blast pushed dust outward. The round left the barrel with a whisper of heat and velocity, then rose into the air, curving on its colossal arc across the vast emptiness. For 7.6 seconds, the world held its breath. Falcon stayed welded to the scope, tracking the invisible corridor where her round drifted. Her lungs burned. Her vision narrowed to a single shimmering trail of imagined flight. Across the valley, Spectre shifted cold deliberately in his countershot. Falcon caught the faint gleam of his lens, the predatory stillness as he settled in. Her bullet was still flying. His was moments from release. "Come on," Scope whispered. Then far off a spark. A bloom of metallic dust, a soft flash around the OO vehicle's rear quarter. No sound, just a distant shudder as the vehicle lurched sideways. Antennas buckled, panels blew outward. A delayed boom rolled up the ridge. Torchlight's coms crackled alive. Relief hit, Falcon-like gravity returning. She exhaled finally, then Spectre fired. His round slammed inches from where her head had been. Falcon was already rolling behind a rock, gravel skittering. "You did it," Scope breathed. 4 kilometers. Move, Havoc barked. Extraction. They sprinted low across the ridge as rotor wash swept in. Radios buzzed with disbelief, 4,012 meters a legend forming in real time. Falcon looked back once. Spectre was gone, swallowed by distance and shadow. She jogged after the others, rifle slung, heartbeats settling into something steady and new, because impossibility, she realized, was just another word for what no one had dared measure yet. And as they moved toward the waiting aircraft, she felt the next challenge gathering somewhere beyond the horizon.